Hi, I'm Femi Oke, and you're in the stream. New Zealand has the highest teen suicide rate in the world, over twice the global average. Today, we'll take a look at what's behind the numbers and explore some possible solutions.
I'm Malika Bilal. We often ask for your pitches on the stream, and today's program is exactly why. We're able to turn stories in your part of the world into conversations for our global community. Now, this issue is a pitch from Benson Davies in Christchurch, New Zealand, and he explains why he sent it to us.
So I think that it would be quite surprising to a lot of people that New Zealand has such a high rate of suicide, especially amongst our youth. I pitched this idea after seeing how frustrated a local campaigner got sitting on select committees where they only seem to talk about how to talk about it. We have some serious mental health issues here in New Zealand, and we need a robust mental health system, but our government's currently underfunding it. And I thought maybe looking at it from outside the bubble of New Zealand might bring some fresh perspective.
Just want to give you a warning. On today's programme, we will discuss suicide, and some of you may find this conversation to be distressing. A recent UNICEF study found that New Zealand has the highest youth suicide rate in the developed world for teenagers aged between the age of 15 and 19 years old. The rate is 15.6 suicides per 100,000 people, and that number is twice as high as the United States and 5 times that of the UK. The rate has been largely steady for more than 2 decades.
New Zealand's National Herald newspaper has been working to bring the often taboo subject into the mainstream. This is a clip from one of the many stories by reporter Olivia Carville in a series called Break the Silence, a father speaking about his teenage daughter, Mia Dunn, who took her own life in 2012.
I saw her in my mind growing up to be this successful, intelligent, beautiful lady that just cracked it in life because of her wise mind and her wise head on her shoulders. And then when this happened, it was like, I'll never watch her grow up to become the beautiful woman that she was meant to be. I'm missing out on my grandkids from her. I can't walk her down the aisle. I just can't watch her grow. And the only thing that I have left of her is the locks of hair that I keep in my wallet. I carry it with me everywhere I go, and some days I pull it out and smell it because it's still got a smell on it.
Joining us from Auckland, Mike King is a mental health advocate. From Northland, Mariah Herbert is a suicide awareness advocate.
Also in Auckland, Sean Robinson is Chief Executive of the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand. And in Dunedin, David Clark is the opposition spokesman for health for the Labour Party. Welcome to the stream, everyone.
Hello, everybody. I want to show our audience a headline here. It's from the Ministry of Health. It goes back to September 1999. I've never quite seen anything quite like this. Suicide and the media, the reporting and portrayal of suicide in the media. It's quite a strict regulation, Mike. Can you explain what happens in New Zealand regarding the reporting, covering of suicide?
We have a very interesting rule in New Zealand that if anyone takes their own life in New Zealand, the media are not allowed to report in detail on it. However, we are allowed to report in detail about overseas suicide. So if there's a suicide in New Zealand, the coroner must rule first before our media are allowed to take it up. But in the event, an overseas event, like for example, when Robin Williams took his own life, within 1 hour we knew he'd died. Within 3 hours we knew how he'd taken his life, and it was a suicide. And as a result of that, which was really interesting, and I think it backs up why our rules are so strict around reporting, was in the wake of Robin Williams' death, we have on average about 11 suicides a week here. In the fortnight after his death, there were 22 a week. Our numbers doubled, and a large percentage of those people were men around the same age as Robin Williams, taking their lives in the same way that he did.
It's so distressing to hear. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. I wanted to share this comment we got from someone in New Zealand when we asked our online community how mental health and suicide prevention is discussed in their community. This person writes in, they're unspoken with heartbreaking circumstances, so they're not discussed. Another person explains why. This is Chris, and he said, New Zealand has an election approaching in September, and it seems as if our youth suicide data has become as taboo as suicide itself. David, I wanted to get you in here on this thought. Is this politicized, the idea of releasing data, or is that something that across the board people have decided is not a good idea?
Well, I do think there's a real sensitivity around the discussion of suicide. It is becoming more common thanks to the efforts of a campaign around normalizing the discussion led by an All Black, one of our rugby stars, John Kirwan, and his leadership on this issue has meant it's been discussed more than previously. Also, Mike King, who's just spoken, his leadership in this space has ensured that it's becoming more okay to talk about suicide in our country. But when at the very time people are starting to talk about suicide, of course we need more resources to support them, to have proper conversations, both medically and also amongst each other, the resources, and the government support, but also the community support. And of course, our culture has to change to make it more okay to talk about and to actually have productive conversations. And that's not something that can be fixed overnight. But there does seem to be a little bit of a resistance on the part of the government to releasing data, to having a conversation that could be critical of the system that's currently in place. And I think that that's a real shame, because I think we've got to admit we've got a problem. We've got to admit the state hasn't always got it right, and we need to make sure there are sufficient resources in place so that we get things, we improve things in future.
Mariah, I'm watching your face as we're going through this first little bit of the program, and I can see your emotions just changing as people are talking. So I'm reading your face. I just want to check that you're okay, but also this idea of culture. The culture in New Zealand is contributing to young people feeling there's no other option other than to end their lives. Can you explain that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, well, for me, coming from a Māori background and even having some Pacific Islander family, it's hard to bring out how I'm feeling growing up, because we're taught that, we don't have much to worry about, apparently, and we have to be strong. We have to just pull through it. And when you know that you're not strong inside, but people are looking, your family are looking, and you have to be that example, you tend to hold back and you don't open up to how you're feeling, and then that it just ends up bottling up because of our culture. And not blaming it, but that's just, we have to be strong because we're a strong culture. But yeah, we have weak times. So
there's a reason that you're a suicide awareness advocate. Can you share why you care so deeply, why you're so deeply involved?
2008, I lost my older sister to suicide, and she was only 14 at the time, and I was 10. I was too young to understand at the time exactly what it was, but growing up, it kept happening around me, and it became more overwhelming. Yeah, that was a couple of years before she passed away. And last year, I lost one of a really close friend of mine that I lived with. He was like my brother, which opened up wounds, and then I found out a lot of my friends were starting to feel the same way. So I didn't want to experience it again. Not one more time. I don't want to experience it. So I'm trying to use my experiences to make it okay to talk.
Mariah, I know what you're saying will resonate with people because of tweets like this. This is Olivia Carville, who we referenced at the top of this show, the reporter out of New Zealand's Herald. She writes, I canvassed New Zealand's 507 schools and found gagged principals questioning our silence on suicide policies. So someone replied to her tweet saying, thank God for the teacher that broke this taboo. Children already know it's happening, and not talking kills. Sean, I wanted to bring you in here to explain to our international audience who may not understand what they're talking about here and why it's not talked about in schools.
Well, I think a lot of it is a misunderstanding and a fear about how to talk about suicide. I think because we have some quite tight rules from the coroner and tight rules for the media, which have some good sense behind them, but they've kind of scared people into thinking, well, we can't talk then about suicide prevention, mental health, full stop. And I think it also is a symptom of the deep-seated stigma that still exists within New Zealand about mental health, about having scary thoughts and feelings, and I guess suicide is the ultimate the ultimate tragic expression of some of those issues. So we do have across the board a culture which is not good at talking about feelings, not good acknowledging that mental health and well-being is a part of human life, and that we're going to face challenges. So and then I think when that's combined with the fact that we know that there can be sort of clusters effects of young people relating to suicide, I think many schools and teachers really just don't know what to do. One of the initiatives we're involved in is Pink Shirt Day, which tries to address bullying and create, a sort of a culture of tolerance within schools. And, we're finding more and more every year that we run that program, more and more schools are keen to get involved because they're looking for tools, they're looking for ways to be able to open up these subjects.
Sean, you don't feel like
that ultimately point into ways to reduce suicide.
Go ahead, Mike.
You don't feel like there's an element of patch protection there? I mean, our CASA trauma team are running around schools. As soon as there's a suicide, they're issuing teachers with statements to make to the kids that aren't allowed to mention anything about the suicide, even when the whole school knows that.
So Mike, back up a little bit, because again, this is something that surprised me about what was happening in New Zealand. So if schoolmates lose a schoolmate, if they've killed themselves, what happens in that school in New Zealand?
So we have a government-led trauma team going in. They're usually psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. They're a contracted group that goes in and they put a plan in place. And that plan is shut everything down. Make sure, and they use scare tactics. They use the contagion line that has been discredited from years ago to shut the conversation down.
And the contagion line is that
if we talk about this, more kids will die. So there's some fact in there, but there is a whole lot of conjecture as well, scaremongering tactics, which shuts the whole conversation down. And the problem with this is it spreads right across into schools. So now we have kids who are having suicidal thoughts. They've diagnosed themselves with a terminal illness. But the fact is, they're being told if they tell their friends about it, they could be sentencing their kids to death. So there are causes and effects. Now, obviously, we have to be careful about this, but I think we are too far over one way, and we need to come back. And the other thing about this is, by doing this, we are excluding the most significant voice in this conversation.
All right, I'm glad you said that, because I'm excluding the most significant voice in this conversation right now. Mariah, what did you want to add?
Yes.
This is totally resonating with you. Go ahead.
Yep, that's so true. What Mike's saying, I agree with that totally, 100%, because even when my sister passed away, she was going to school at the time at Kara College, and it was kind of the same thing. They were telling kids not to talk about it. And then the very following week, three girls, young girls, ended up committing suicide. So it's the whole, you're right there in the middle of it and you're not able to talk about it. It was the same thing happened when my friend passed away a year ago. And up at the school, a whole lot of kids heard about it, but weren't allowed to talk about their own feelings because they were feeling the same way as well. But the school's like, no, we're not going to talk about it. We can't, we can't feed it, is what they say. So I agree with Mike on that, and it's we need to talk about it.
This
Yeah,
is-
absolutely. I mean, I think where this whole sort of attempt to create safety has sort of got really twisted to a situation where people don't know how to talk about suicide safely, and so therefore shut the whole thing down, which is in fact probably the most unsafe thing that they can do. So, you know, there's a whole cluster of fear, risk reduction, people not wanting to sort of, you know, have the responsibility for potentially having caused, you know, more suicides. That's really shutting things down. And I think the point that both of you make that is really important is, look, young people are already talking about this anyway. We have this thing called the internet and social media. So, you know, what needs to happen is we need to turn this situation around into how can schools, how can communities, how can young people, how can the media, you know, have a very open debate around this issue, have a very open discussion that's constructive and helpful and useful, rather than go into fear and risk aversion mode and close the whole thing down, which actually is the worst thing we can do.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I wanted to bring this in, and David, I hear you, and I'll go to you with this. This is a tweet we got from the Amazonian who says, in Pacific spaces, suicide is a taboo and young people don't have agency culturally. To be seen and not heard stifles conversations about well-being. So what to do about that specific issue? We actually got a video comment from someone. She is a politician, member of parliament. This is Julie Ann Ginter, and this is what she told us.
Kia ora. I'm Julianne Genter, the health spokesperson for the Green Party and a member of Parliament in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Our youth suicide rate is truly shocking, and we need to get to the bottom of it with an independent nationwide inquiry into mental health services. There are many solutions that we could be exploring, but we need to have adequate funding in order to be able to do that. Automatic screening, increased access to talk therapy for young people are just two ideas that the Green Party would like to see.
So David, talk therapy.
Yeah, the Labour Party shares that view, actually. We're both parties in opposition at the moment and both frustrated with what is happening, the Green Party and the Labour Party. We think there was a review held recently in New Zealand called the People's Mental Health Review, and Mike was a part of this. He may speak some more about it. They asked for 4 very reasonable things to happen. One was that there be a review of what's going on currently in response to suicide in terms of how state resources are being employed, what's working, what's not working. They asked that there be then funding where it was needed to follow up, you know, do the review first and then work out whether you need to spend money and where it's best spent. Independent oversight of the mental health system so that we actually have a critical eye and not just the government reporting on how it's doing things and whether it's doing them right or not by its own account. We actually need that independent oversight and some more education programs. And look, there were 500 people who contributed their own stories to that review. And I think what they asked for was incredibly reasonable. Those things seem like a really good starting point for the conversation. I also am a funeral celebrant, and I've dealt with suicide. I've dealt with suicides where there was I've conducted funeral and had a grieving process. It's really, excuse me, my camera's fallen over. I'm back again. I've seen a grieving process that was really good, and I've seen grieving processes that have been bad, where funerals have been conducted and people have been not allowed to express their feelings or even discuss the topic. And it's got to do with our cultural history and the idea that people are resilient, they're independent, and we have this cultural myth of the man alone. We are only now beginning to talk about suicide in a way that we actually participate, but we've got a long way to go.
Good recovery, David. I wasn't expecting to introduce any laughs into this conversation, but Mike, when you talk to kids, it's something to behold. You go out into the community and talk to kids. I have to show our audience something. This is from Maui TV, and this is you sharing, maybe oversharing a little bit. Have a listen.
Down. The reason I had low self-esteem was because I was an ugly child. I know it's hard to believe looking at me now. I was a young fella, man. I was ugly, serious. No, seriously, man, I was ugly. I was 4'11", had buck teeth, big ears. I had a huge head. For a lot of these.
Totally transformed, Mike. Congratulations. Going out and talking to kids, what are you doing? How are you helping them? How does that help? Mariah, for one, is laughing her head off right now, so that's a good start. But what are you doing? What's the therapy?
So what I do is I go out there and I normalize the inner critic, that little critical voice that everyone has in their head, those little conversations that we all have, but no one ever talks about. And the first time I ever spoke about it was in a school in Northland, type of area school that had lost 5 young people to suicide. And as I was talking about my battles with my inner critic, suddenly all of these kids became really interested in what I was saying, and they were nudging each other down the aisles and going, can you believe this guy's talking about? And what I discovered was I was the first broken adult that had ever spoken to them. See, and what I've discovered is our kids believe that they're living in a world of perfect people, that everyone has the perfect answer, all the significant adults in their lives are perfect, they know everything, the teachers in their lives are perfect, and they are the only ones that have an inner critic. But by normalizing that, and helping them to recognize that they're not alone, it suddenly bonds them. And my favorite moment in the talk is how many kids in this room have conversations like I do. Put your hands up. And when they put their hands up, I go, now look around. And as they look around and they see that 90% of the room has their hand up, suddenly you can feel the relief come over them. And now they're going, I'm not mentally unwell, I am normal.
I like that. I want to share another solution from someone. This is a member of our community, Robert Reed. Here's what he thinks.
New Zealand government, wake up. Your people are killing themselves. And your response? Let's put $5 million into a boat rather than putting $7.2 million into actually helping our struggling mental health system. You wonder why we have the highest rates of youth suicide? Because you don't help. Our system is screaming for help, and you're not doing anything. Step up your game, because this is not good enough.
When he mentions the $5 million for a boat, I just want our audience to know it's a government grant to New Zealand's sailing team. But Mariah, when you hear that and he says we're screaming for help, what would be the one thing that you think the government should do?
What you're saying, pretty much. It's pretty straightforward, really. There's a lot of things that our government are putting their money towards, and it's just like, it's right there, right in front of you. Mike's talking about it day in, day out. It's pretty simple, but I don't know what we have to do.
Look.
Mike's got such a huge voice, and he's done so much to try to push them to put more money towards it, or even to just show a little bit of care, but it's just like, no, it just gets swept under the rug, and it's really frustrating for us all over New Zealand that see this.
Mike, I've got 1 minute left. Guess I've got 1 minute left. I want to end on a hopeful note. Tell me, if I am sitting here watching this in New Zealand or anywhere around the world, and I'm a young person, and I feel like I'm really distressed, what do you tell me? What's the message that we leave our audience with?
Look, we can continue to throw stones at the problem and negatives at the problem, but it's time to start throwing positives at the solution. The thing that has to change most of all, if we are to help people in crisis, is we need to change our attitude towards people in distress.
Got it. Mike,
My generation
it's a good
is
point to end on from now, Mike, because we're going to take all of you onto our online post show. Mike and Mariah and Sean and also David, you'll pick up with them in just a moment. And if you're watching and you are worried, or you know somebody else who is worried about their mental health, the best place to get help is your doctor, maybe your local mental health provider. But if you or someone else is in danger or endangering others, call the police straight away. And if you're sitting right now in New Zealand, here's the information on where you can seek help. We're out of time for today's programme, but remember, our conversation continues online, aljazeera.com/thestream. Hello there, welcome back. This is our online post show. Mike, I had to truncate what you were saying because we were right at the end of that show. Finish your thoughts, go ahead.
So, you know, in New Zealand, we've got this habit of blaming everybody else for the problem. You know, whenever there's a suicide, it's what's the government doing? What are the mental health services doing? What is everyone else doing? My question is, what are we doing? 40% of our kids in school will have a suicidal thought before they leave, whether it's a fleeting one-off thought or whether it's a recurring thought that drags them down on a daily basis. But 80% of the kids who are having recurring thoughts never ask for help. And the reason they never ask for help is because they're worried about what other people will think, what other people will say, what other people will do. It's like Sean said, stigma is still one of the biggest killers in New Zealand. So my question is, what are we all doing? What are we doing to encourage young people to be more open? Not even just young people, for my mates to be open. I'm feeling like crap today. I don't want to be here today. What is preventing them from coming to us and opening up and talking? So I don't believe that it's the people in crisis who are the problem. It is the rest of us, those of us who aren't. What are we doing to encourage people to come forward? And I seriously believe, if we can get people talking about small problems before they become big problems, they won't become suicidal thoughts.
Mike, here's someone who would agree with you. This is a tweet we got from Mary. She says, making suicide safe to talk about includes removing labeling suicidal people as weak and needy, and the media should be kinder. Sean, I wanted you to pick up on that and this idea that those who have suicidal thoughts are weak. Where does that come from, and how do you combat it?
Well, I think it fundamentally comes from the stigma around mental health and the notion that we should all be tough and strong, and we should be able to handle things. I know from my own experience of bipolar. And when I was younger, I did attempt to take my own life. There was this incredible self-stigma that came from, the stigma around me that I should be able to handle this. There was something wrong with me for not handling this. And it was really only when I reached a crisis that I started to reach out to people. And unfortunately, a lot of people are very frightened when someone reaches out. And my encouragement to people who are, in a really bad space is, look, keep trying, because there will be people in your friendship network, in your family, your whānau, there will be people who care enough just to sort of be there and listen. They don't have to try and solve the situation. They just have to kind of walk alongside you. Yeah, I think fundamentally it does come down to stigma.
Yeah. Do you think the way New Zealand thinks about mental illness is changing? Is all this campaigning making a big difference?
I think it is changing. We've had a 20-year program, using people like John Kerr and the All Black to try to address it. But look, there's a hang of a long way to go. Part of the reason why many more people now seek mental health services, and we've had a 70% increase in 10 years, you can't say exactly what proportion is driven by people being more willing to talk, but I think we have made some impact, but there's a huge distance to go to get people to feel okay about talking about how they feel, how they're thinking, and just make that part of the sort of normal day-to-day part of relating to one another.
Yeah. I'm going to share a tweet.
But we also need to have the infrastructure. We also need to have the infrastructure in place to meet these people that are coming. And see, the overwhelming problem with our suicide prevention system in New Zealand right now is we don't have the people, the capability to cope with the number of people coming in.
Totally.
And our suicide prevention policy at the moment is, when you get to the hospital, you have to actually prove that you're suicidal. And that used to be saying to someone there, I'm feeling suicidal, can I get help? Now the line is so much higher that people are having to actually attempt suicide before they can be seen. So what kind of suicide prevention policy is that encourages people to attempt suicide to actually get the care that they need?
Mike, it's so interesting you said that, and David, I see you nodding your head because we got this comment via Facebook from Corinda. She said, many youth simply do not reach out for help since they know there's very little available for them. Some youth, including my own son, simply took their own life after asking for help from services and being turned away. My son was only 19 or 20, and yet he was turned away in crisis, even though he was under mental health services already. David, of course, we can't speak to the specifics of this case, but can you imagine a case of being turned away when you were reaching out for help?
Yep, I hear of them far too often. General practitioners, our doctors in the community talk about their frustration when they refer people on to ask them to get help from secondary services. And as Mike said, just saying you're suicidal is no longer enough. People are turning up and saying, I feel suicidal, and they're being turned away. We've also got a huge gap in terms of mild to moderate mental health needs and the response, because if somebody
nearly a YouTube moment there, David.
I saw that with a depression or anxiety. They have a right, I think, to be heard by somebody. They go to their general practitioner in the community. They've only got 15 minutes to talk about what's going on for them. Usually by the time introductions are over and they've got the courage up to get something off their chest, the appointment's over. And we have no service available for those who are just wrestling with anxiety and depression in the early stages at all, pretty much, in the community. Certainly not accessible. And our party believes that we need to fund such a service. It's not asking a whole lot, because if we don't get those things early and don't permit the conversation, don't provide the talking therapies, we're going to get more people turning up, and the threshold for care will get higher again. And it's high enough already. It's far too high.
I guess I'm about to wrap up this conversation, but not before I go to a tweet from Mike King. Mariah, this might just embarrass you a little bit. Have a look here at my laptop. My hero. What an amazing young woman. Read, learn, and share people. Heart, heart, heart. There's a lot of love there for you, Mariah. What is it like for you doing the work that you do?
Personally, it's more for me. It's a release, but I know that I help people. It's because of Mike, actually, that I finally had the heart and the strength to share my story. And I'm glad that I did, because since then, hundreds and hundreds of young people, even adults, have come to me. And it actually makes me cry knowing that something so simple as me just talking about it has saved lives. Like, they literally comment, like, message me, you've saved my life, you saved a life today. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like, I literally have to sit back and just thank God and thank Mike and thank everyone, all the support for pushing me to do it, because I can now support others to do the same thing. It's not, you don't have to go get millions of dollars to share your story. You can just do it as simple as I did, and it gets spreaded. So
all right, well, I'm going to say goodbye because you're making me cry now. Malika, where do you want to end?
I'll end with two comments. One is a reminder that this isn't just happening in New Zealand. This is someone who's watching from Fiji. This is Mariah. She says, P.S. I'm in Fiji, but I work in this same space, and many young people are missing trusted, safe spaces to express their emotions. So that's really all over the world. But I'll give the very last comment to Josiah, who says, we 100% need to talk about this. This tool is exceptional and can assist in safe convos about suicide. It's auntied.co.nz. You can see it there. Sometimes life sucks, and there's tools on what you can do when you have that feeling.
All right, and for our back crew here, I'm just going to remind them we've got a little slate for the end of the show so people in New Zealand can get some help. But before we put that up, I'm going to say thank you to David and Sean, Mariah and Mike. I wish you continued success in all of your advocacy and your work. Take care, everybody.